Well, I've got some development since last time. Now, last time you weren't here, Matt, which is
Nope.
fine. You had some important stuff to deal with in your personal life.
COVID.
Yes, I think maybe this is the with you, Matt. With me, it's always five. You got five kids. I think you've had COVID five times, as
Uh,
far as I can remember.
I've gotten it
Ouch.
twice. Both
Ouch.
Yeah,
conferences, both times.
yeah. Anyhow, so last time we were discussing the phenomenon of people talking on speakerphones,
Uh,
which I'm here in Antwerp, Belgium. Which, as anytime Antwerp comes up on the podcast, which I think has maybe happened 3 or 4 times over the years, I like to mention that in King's Quest 1 or 2, there was this big blob that would hop through the forest that was called an Antwerp. And so in my mind, that was my introduction to the word Antwerp. And every time I think of Antwerp, I think of that giant blob hopping through the forest.
there's like
And
somebody from Brussels on staff who really hated Antwerp and was like, "I will teach the Americans to."
so who knows what was going on at Sierra Games? But there's two things I want to go over. One, I think I haven't actually spent time in like downtown Antwerp. I've been to Devox in Antwerp, and some other reason I was in Antwerp. But I think that it's really nice down here. What I would say is that when you walk around Antwerp, there's a lot of things for a flâneur, someone who walks around aimlessly to enjoy it, to see. And architecturally, like Antwerp feels like if you took like the Amsterdam architectural style, canal houses that go all the way up, narrow staircases, all jammed together. But instead of being the kind of, let's say, austere, plain-spoken outward appearance of Amsterdam architecture, you were like, what if instead we were like Parisian, almost Barcelonan, right? So like you look at any row of Antwerpen like houses and they're all different and they all have a lot of outside decorations and facades. And my theory, I need to look this up. I think maybe when the Spanish were expelled from the Netherlands, they kind of stayed and took over Belgium. So Catholicism was still like a big Belgian thing. So like the whole like, decorative Baroque nature of kind of a Catholic culture still persists in the architecture here, which makes it a very lovely place to walk around.
And it
Very
wasn't
visually
damaged
appealing.
in like World War II or anything like that, where it's all
Well,
new.
I think I walked down one street that clearly was like, this is new building, but there's a lot of Antwerp that has been around for it feels like, well, at least from American eyes, a long time. Lots of buildings that say at least 1900.
Everything is older than America except Australia.
That's right. Which is all a sort of visual preface, a kind of like, you remember those books in the 1900s, and they would spend like 2 chapters before they got to the fucking point? That's what I just did here. I want you to sort of like imagine the context. So I came across someone, and once again, they were talking on the speakerphone, but they were just like yelling and gesticulating madly. And I was at the full end of a long European block. Like, if you imagine like a Parisian block, super long, I was at the end of it and I could still hear this guy. And he was just going fucking apeshit. I don't know what he was saying. I don't know if he was excited or angry, but he was doing it. And it made me realize that, like, gesticulating, using your hands and your body language has been a big part of human communication over the years. And when it comes to, as we were talking last week, I think we're transitioning from audio communication over a phone to video communication over a phone. So we're adding this visual element. But the problem, or not problem, I think what's going to happen is over the next 30 or so years, all of that gesticulation is going to be reduced down to basically your chest above and one of your hands, because you have to hold the phone in another hand. So you can't use that hand to gesticulate, right? Like you got to hold that stable. You might have the up the nose shot, but so any sort of like body language you want, you're going to have to express with your head and your neck and one of your hands, because no one can see anything else.
And your sweatpants will be absolutely still.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can't use your body or your hips. You can't sort of like I guess you could kind of hunch over to indicate something. You could like raise yourself up to indicate something.
I think you get the phone into the action though, where you know you're showing your, maybe you're giving yourself some extreme zooms as
I
you're
like this.
gesticulating. Your left hand, right hand, offhand becomes like the cinematographer here, and
Yes.
it becomes a lot more involved, and probably that's the next stage in video conferencing, is not just like After Effects with hats and funny eyebrows and stuff, but actual like lens flares and slow motions, and I think we might be onto something.
Well,
I
like,
like
no, I
this.
think you're going in
I like
general. So
this.
you're just saying that the phone is becoming now a prop as part of the gesticulating maneuvers, right? It's almost like you've given an actor like a cane or something to actually go further with.
Well,
So
you've given the actor like a handle to the camera, so they get to ham it up for the camera, like every actor probably secretly aspires to direct.
I like what you're saying. Like we should test this theory out over future episodes. I think we're all cinematographers now.
Oh
like,
yeah,
that's basically
check out this lovely
like
background.
We're gonna take that role on. Like, we should kind of review the Stanley Kubrick au revoir or oeuvre or whatever, and see what we can learn from that. Like maybe like
every Zoom I have has blood getting out of an elevator.
I think I realize it's not Kubrick, but I think maybe the shortcut is you just watch Goodfellas and you're like, that's how I'm going to be a cinematographer, right? Lots of good shots in there.
That's not Kubrick.
Lots of matching to action. Right. I know. The Kubrick's a little more like I think this guy that I encounter in the street, that's when you go full Kubrick, right? Like if you're really laying into something, then of course you want to study the master, right? But if you're just like, hey, I bought some pants and I really need to return them. What's going on here? Just sort of like the Scorsese kind of situation. Nothing major, just a little dramatic.
Yeah. Well, like you say, Cote, ultimately, with the speakerphone, we all now truly can star in our own movies.
Yeah. So I think, and I've witnessed multiple other people just like from just normal conversation on a video phone, the Uber driver who's just like, you can tell they're just walking down the street and they're just sort of like hanging out with people, which is fine, right? Up to the apeshit people who are just like working shit out in their life, like really just like doing it for everyone to listen to on a video phone. And it's the new normal. I'm happy with it. I'm like, I want to explore being invited into other people's lives and forming some sort of like critical, almost Hallmark greeting card relationship and self-actualization based on what they're doing, which I think will be, I might grow as a person, and I hope we all can.
Okay, good job, Cote. I even tried to cut you off there. We'll see now. We'll see.
I saw that.
We'll see where I'll do. As you can say, I get to produce the show, so we'll see how much of that.
Speaking of Tourette,
I feel like I had like a perfect end on that, and then but you improv'd it. You went further with it, so I don't know.
Yeah. I think there was some delay in your message being sent because I saw it pop up, and then like 15 seconds later, I ended.
It's all right. So, it's fine. You're all good. So, hey, for all those listening, watching rather, when you listen to the podcast, you're going to hear a fantastic ad read by me talking about Nasuni. So you should check them out. You should go to the show notes, to the website, and you should go support them because, they're a great sponsor and we appreciate them being on. All right, Cote, whenever you're ready now.
All right. Hold on. I took a note earlier.
I took a note. We did get like some incredible words in here on there. Flâneur. I didn't even know how to. I had to go to the ChatGPT, so that was good though. I like that.
Oh, what did it tell you? Let's see how accurate it is.
Well, I just wasn't sure how to spell it. I didn't. It has like the A,
Yeah, and the little
like
hat
French word. I didn't know. So
yep.
I was like, so I had to go get the. So that was a good one. That's new to me. I mean, not use that day to day. So I'm gonna try now. I know it. I'll try to work it into something.
Yeah. Well, good. There's your word for the day.
Maybe the title.
All right. Let's see. All right. Well, everyone knows that there's only like one kind of chip that I like, and that's a chip that you can put in salsa, guacamole. I could take or leave nachos. I mean, we could get into that. I'm not really sure about nachos. Like, I love a chalupa.
Good nachos are good.
That's true. That's true.
Like, and your tortilla chips, there's definitely some that start to fall off the threshold into like potato chip land, where it's
I mean, stop. I'm going to try to control myself to keep it brief so we can get to the actual thing. But I feel like I'm kind
Don't let me hold you back. Let's talk about nachos.
I'm kind of over the big pile of nachos that you put a bunch of shit on, because you waste all those nachos at the bottom, right? I want like individual handcrafted nachos where every nacho is like its own experience and you don't just like throw out a bunch of stuff at the bottom. Now, I like a chalupa, or as they call it outside of Texas, a tostada. But I feel like a chalupa is kind of like the Kronos of a nacho, right? Like it's like this Titan thing that was like broken apart into like a pantheon of little tiny nachos that you got to fucking deal with.
It's a lazy taco.
Like, yeah, chalupas are great, but like nachos, I don't know. I could take it or leave it. So those are the kind of chips that I like. But there's been a lot going on with Intel, and I know you two are crazy with chips. So like, I need like, it looks like this company is about to be like self-broken up. Maybe you sell some stuff off. Like, what's going on there? Like what happened?
Well, I'll give you a quick recap here. Is, Intel, as we've been talking about on the show, and they laid out their grandiose strategy that we talked about. Actually, 3 years ago we talked about it, and I think now we're talking about it again. Ultimately, not doing well, right? So now they've essentially decided that one way to go forward is to essentially break the company up into multiple parts, primarily consisting of the foundry, which would just build the chips, right? Much like TSMC. And then another group that would be, if you will, a fabless chip design, where they would just go forward and design the new fancy chips to be used in servers and, iPhones and whatever, right, going forward. And so this is sort of like a retreat from the Gelsinger strategy of like, well, the reason, at least kind of saying in his words, like, Intel has all these advantages because they kind of do everything together, right? They're all just one big group. So this is sort of an admission that, or at least the discussion of an admission that like, this isn't going to work, right? Doing it this way is not going to work. And the company is literally, if you will, losing value by the day, and something needs to be done immediately or in the very near future to kind of stem the tide, decide what's going on. And so that's where they find themselves at this current time. Go ahead, Matt.
And the spinoff of the foundries, the idea being there is that they can provide a viable alternative to TSMC, where they have the expertise to help other people make their chips because they make Intel chips, but they've been behind TSMC for several years. And the idea was, well, if the foundry can be competitive, that'll be like the other leg of the business. But because they're behind TSMC, they can't get flagship customers. So their customer is Intel, the chip part of the factory. But because they only have like one big flagship customer, the foundry does a lot of things specific to their one big customer, who's themselves. Right. Which means that like they're having a hard time getting, tier one manufacturing, customers for their foundries. Meanwhile, their next gen chips, the latest and greatest from Intel, because the Intel foundries are so far behind, are being fabbed by TSMC.
Right. And then the final thing to add in there, right, is sort of, I guess the last, the most frustrating thing probably for Intel executives is like, well, of course, they build GPUs, but their GPUs are significantly behind NVIDIA. So, you kind of end up with like three things, right? You're not a great foundry. You're not good at necessarily building the new chips, at least the GPUs, right? And then the legacy architecture of x86, while it's still going to make tons of money, like going forward forever, right? It's not the cool new place, right? It's not the place where we're going to continue to grow. So you're going to end up with like, you have three kind of average things, and the company's sort of tied together. And so now everyone's saying, that's not what we want. You got to find a way to make great things.
Yeah. And AMD has tied them in the server chip market, which used to be their bread and butter. That was the high, they were the flagship fastest processors. that was where they had the best margins. Well, now their long-time competitor AMD has tied them in where they have the best yield, or where they have the best margins, and AMD's got better GPUs, and people like Apple and now Microsoft are on ARM, so there's a lot of downward pressure on just the margins.
And you've got Qualcomm just making the ARM chips that that a lot of the Windows PCs going forward looks like they're going to use, right? So it's almost a way to look at it too. It's just to name each competitor and be like, well, AMD is sort of leading x86 and certainly more viable on the GPU side. TSMC is far and away the best foundry in the world. There's like there's really not even a second, right? And then of course, you have NVIDIA, far and away the leader in GPU. So Intel's sort of like, well, we compete with all of them and we're not really competing well against any of them. So this kind of goes back to like the Gelslinger thing that we talked about several years ago. And we talked about just a few weeks ago. It's like, well, he was paid, as Matt so aptly pointed out, he took all the money, he took the big bag of money, and his goal, and like we all would, like, I mean, let's not like judge, like we would have all taken it. And he's like, but now they're many years into this, and I think the question would be a couple of things. It's like, one, is breaking up this company in some way, is that the future? And then I think two, just like a coach of a sports team, you would say like, is this the right leader to do it? Like, is Gelslinger the person to like, break this up and lead it or take over one part of it? Or do you have to kind of just go through and just bring in a whole new set of leaders and kind of, if you will, kind of reset the whole thing? And then of course, it's, maybe not ironic, but just sort of interesting. Intel, right? Andy Grove's famous line, it's what only the paranoid survive. But like, it just kind of shows how hard business is, right? All of the things we just mentioned were once Intel's greatest strengths, right? That was like, go back 10, 15 years. That's what made Intel this incredibly successful company. Now things have changed. Maybe Intel, I'm sure they were paranoid, right? But they couldn't stop these things. So now they find themselves in like a pretty difficult position.
Well, they're in a difficult position, and by most accounts, they've gotten stagnant. A lot of the really sharp folks left, started their own companies, went to join, the cloud service providers, working on their chips, or the competition. And, Intel has more employees than NVIDIA and TSMC combined. So that doesn't bode well for, they just laid off 15,000 people. So, they're probably going to do that again as they try to get more competitive. But the question is, where do you go? How do you get there? The only like tailwind advantage they have is they're American, so they're getting big chip subsidies from the need to
the CHIPS Act and
the CHIPS Act needed to repatriate workloads onto American soil. But TSMC is like, all right, we'll open some factories in the U.S. So they're not. It's a little blunted, but literally that's about the only positive thing I've seen for Intel lately. Their new chip, which this is what Cote is really excited about, is they've got a new chip, the 200V core something or other. Great name, whatever. Name. Yeah, whatever. Its claim to fame is it's power competitive against ARM. It's faster than ARM, but the ship sailed, right? Microsoft is happy to continue to the Wintel duopoly, but they've put a lot of their eggs in the Qualcomm basket with these new Copilot laptops, and Apple is never coming back, right? Apple is never ever coming back. And so you've got a new chip that is faster, power competitive. That's great, but you're not going to claw back the market. You're going to hold the tide, is my expectation.
So I do think take me back to like you spent some time in corporate strategy. I think in the end, this all comes back to like when Gelslinger first got there, right? I think the board of directors, and I think Gelslinger is a compelling speaker, someone that comes across as very knowledgeable, knows the business inside and out, was sort of like, a returning hero. But like what it comes down to is like most of the time in these, executive rooms, right? It's sort of like laying out a complicated strategy, saying we're going to do everything, right? In this case, be the foundry, be great at GPUs, be great at x86 is sort of the strategy people want to say yes to. But in the end, right, like what you have to do is you have to make some choice. And I think that's what Intel has to decide. It's like, what do we think we can be great at it again, right? It could be any one of these things. Like, could be like, we're just going to be a manufacturer, or even, you know, something that we've been talking about in software defined talk forever, right? Like RISC-V, right? Like, seems like, you know, I don't, you know, would you make a big bet on a new instruction set? Would you do something, you know, like, what are you going to do? And I just think at the end, right, it always feels like the board of directors and current CEO never want to make a bet because they feel like they're closing doors. But I always think in these rooms, when they choose to do everything, it's like they closed all the doors simultaneously without thinking it through. I don't know. What's your corporate strategy hat say?
Well, I mean, it's what y'all are describing is there's the potential for Intel to unbundle itself. That there's sort of like, we manufacture the stuff, we design the stuff, and we also, like, there's a third thing which is a little inscrutable to me, which is like, we innovate the stuff. Like we like
that doesn't appear to be on the table right now. That's the problem. Is like everyone is out innovating.
Well, I get so that's fair. I think maybe the third thing is we have an ability to predict what the market will be in 5 years, right? Or whatever the time span is, right? And so like whatever
that's
it is.
Also, historically, they've been bad at that. They miss mobile and they miss GPUs.
Right, exactly. So there's kind of like, so I mean, it's irresistible to compare it to like Apple in the 90s, right? Which was a disaster, basically. Yeah. And then so you have, I mean, there was also this Paul Graham piece about founder mode or some fucking bullshit. And so there's almost like you return this person who, like, what do they say in The Road? They carry the flame. And then and at the end of the road, the guy who picks up that kid's like, you're a little fucked up, aren't you? Or some Cormac McCarthy thing like that. But you bring back this person who carries the flame, and what they're going to do is they're going to figure out how to cut away all this other stuff just to focus on one big bet, right? And kind of like get to like, well, we got to like get back to design, make those weird lozenge Macs, and then that will accelerate us into iPods and then iPhones, and then we'll be on top of the world, right? Or something that's kind of reinventing stuff. So maybe what you want to do is you bring back the flame holder and you just like take the flamethrower and cut away all this other stuff that's not working and hope something emerges from it. But it does seem like it's also like an interesting, especially since I don't really know how chips work, except from what you two say and listening to Ben Thompson. But it's also an interesting opportunity to kind of like look at airport business book level strategy thinking.
Yeah.
And just kind of like ask the question of like, I mean, it's just chips. How hard can it be? Like, why can you not, like, why all of a sudden is AMD better at it? Like, what did NVIDIA do? Like, did you have lunches that were too long, or like you weren't doing this? Like, what is like the weird ingredient that like makes it mess up and kind of result in this? And I have no idea, but it's an interesting study in seems straightforward. Like, just spend a lot of money on R&D and like come up with cool shit and then manufacture it.
Yeah, I think the problem with chip R&D is what you're building, what you're designing today isn't coming out for 2+ years, and so historically, it was like, well, you just kind of look ahead and you do more what you're doing now, and you're generally going to hit it, right? You're like, well, we're gonna increase the CPU count, the core count, you know, whatever. It's going to get faster, and you know, Intel was famous for their manufacturing upgrade, chip design upgrade. So the TikTok pattern of every 18 months, every year, doing one and then the other, one then the other. And the problem is like right now when they look at the roadmap, they got outplayed, out strategized on the 2-year plan. I mean, AMD was like, here's how we're going to capture more of the server market. They had a good plan there. they made some, good investments by acquiring ATI Radeon for GPU technology and kept that alive and competitive. And obviously Nvidia's got more like a 5-year out horizon where they've been on the GPU planning stages. They own that because, well, they planned everything well in advance. But my question is we've talked about the keeper of the flame and the comparisons to Steve Jobs returning from the John Scully days. Is like, was Gelsinger ever that guy? Was he ever like, he's the chip guy, he's the chip whisperer, he's the guy who understood this? Or is he just like an executive who did well after he left Intel, and like we're bringing him back because he had a good stint here and we assume that he's the guy to recover everything? I mean, the business folks.
Well, let me throw out a theory about the keeper of the flame, the return of this person, right? Is like, they have to be someone that after you lay off thousands and thousands of employees, that it has to be someone that the technical people still think is not an idiot, right? Like, and so it could be, like Steve Jobs, not a technical person, right? But like, they still have this, like, they know what they're doing, and like
they had the vision and they understood how to the company could fulfill that vision. And that's what I asked about Gelsinger. Is he a maintainer, or is he actually he's got the vision? And
I mean, he like, I assume because he like wrote some book on the x86 architecture, he could like go up on a whiteboard and like draw pictures of chips or some shit, whatever you do, right? So it's sort of like you could go to the level of like the technical people you have left to like finish out the job. But it is like, you're still in this quandary of, well, let me come at it from a different angle. Is like, I also think that like, if you're going to lay 15,000 people off, what were those people doing? That it's viable to like get rid of them. Not what were they doing in a sense of like they're not doing anything, but like, how did your business strategy get to the point where you had this excess amount of people that now you can just get rid of? Like it's a little strange. And that's kind of what the question becomes, is like, how does a company get to that point? Because from what you're saying, it seems like maybe, I don't know if this is the case in the software business, but maybe in the chip business this applies. Because I feel like if you're doing servers and laptops, maybe not so much. But I guess in chips, you can miss a market window once, but if you miss 2 market windows in a row, you're fucked.
Yeah.
Right. Like you can't really ever catch up.
It's a lead time, right? I mean, it's like 4 or 5 years. And to be, I mean,
exactly.
2000, I think it's sort of, I mean, outsider looking in, you would just say it's like, well, I think they just have a lot of initiatives. Like, kind of, we've outlined a lot of them, right? They're trying to do lots of different things. Not necessarily.
Right.
This still takes like to just be okay at GPUs manufacturing and x86 and chips. I mean, it's just to be average takes a lot of resources, right? So let's not forget that.
Yeah,
and then and I think and then just the broader point is just sort of like, while we're talking a lot about Gelsinger here, it's like sometimes like the market just moves, and sometimes like this is sort of an answer no one would want. Like sometimes the goal is just to stay in the game longer, right? So it's like if you're Intel, Matt kind of already outlined some of the things they missed, but like something new is always coming, right? Like, if you miss mobile, then maybe you get it on the next version, right? So I do think, it's probably not what Intel would like to hear, but it's sort of like, well, can you right the ship? Can you make yourself profitable on at least some of these core businesses? And can you at least set yourself up to like try to catch the next wave? Because like, I mean, we talk about NVIDIA like being so great, but like, just 5 years ago, it was just sort of like, oh, they make GPUs and like no one's really using them, right? Or they're being used in these very edge cases.
They were top of the gaming world,
right? Top of gaming, or maybe they were doing Bitcoin mining. And I think Intel, rightfully at that point, they're like, well, why would we invest a lot of money there? Like there's going to be a huge market there. And then, then suddenly AI changes everything. So, it's always like, it's dark, it's like whatever the cliche you want to use, darkest before dawn or whatever, right? It's sort of like, hey, Intel's still going to make money for a long time. Intel has a lot of smart people. You got to ride it out.
I like that because one, it brings up another thing that I was thinking of. The infamous, depending on your viewpoint on things, the infamous or the famous. I think when Jobs had to get $100 million from Bill Gates to like make payroll or whatever, right? Like there was a huge that was insane at the time, and then also it brings up this other question, which is, so if you're just gonna like stay alive and wait to catch the next wave, it also brings up the question of like, what is the asset that you have and how do you track that, right? And I was talking with some people here, and like there's a lot of like, when we say airport business book stuff, there's a lot of like mystic stuff about like, what is our corporate identity, and we've got to like ask the why to figure out like what we do. But at a point like this, it seems like what you do is you inventory all the people that work for you and the IP that you own, and you just hold on to them as much as possible so that you're ready when your next window comes. Like there's no principles up on a wall that is like your identity. There's just like, we have these people that think about chips.
And I'm sure they have like McKinsey or someone in there, but like just stating like the most obvious thing, right, would be like, well, there are some national security reasons that the United States wants to be good at manufacturing, right? Chips.
Right.
So you could
and that would be an asset too, right?
You could be like, while it's not like, and Intel is probably the most logical company to like try to reinvigorate, manufacturing and create a foundry. So you sort of kind of convince yourself that like the US government, all of us, the US taxpayers are going to invest because we ultimately believe this is important to us to have. Like that's something that, TSMC and other people don't have. So that would be a starting point, but it isn't necessary. You probably don't feel good about saying that. You're like, you probably want to say like, we're like going to create the next best chips and we're the smartest. And it's like, no, it's going to be some kind of like almost national subsidy that's going to see you through. But that would be a starting point, right? That's an advantage that they would have.
It's a way to hang on.
Right.
But it's like it's analogous to airlines. You like look at those businesses and you're like, this in a natural order, in a natural world, they would not exist. They're totally fucked, right? Like, but you go through I don't know how it is in the rest of the world, but you go through like 10-year cycles where just like, I don't know, the government's like, we got to fly. Like we need the Airbus.
We got to keep some of these in business, one way or another.
And so we got to figure it out. However, that I have no idea how it happens, but somehow these airlines like survive despite like whatever it is they're doing. So like, yeah, maybe that's something that like our generation, just like we were introduced to the internet. We went from alphanumeric pagers to the internet and rotary phones before that. Maybe there's certain technology assets that just become part of the national infrastructure, just like an airline, and you just kind of keep them alive and help them out with that, like, which probably is wise. I don't know. It'll be good to see how this stuff resolves, because like I think in you two giving me the overview, like I can see how I might enjoy the big pile of chips. Like that might be an enjoyable thing to see how that resolves. Now, speaking of things resolving, this is another thing I could use some counseling on. I read the blog post from I don't know who it was, probably one of the big wigs over at Elastic.
Shay Gannon, I think is his name, is the author.
Now we could just talk the whole rest of the episode about the fact that each paragraph was bracketed with some square brackets that sort of like used some one word kind of like kitschy way of summarizing a vibe of that paragraph. I don't think I dislike this. I think I like whatever is going on there. I really appreciate that part. Maybe that's some good after show content. We could go just like word by word on what's going on with that paragraph. But my understanding is, let's see, AWS is stealing all their money. So
I think you should say was stealing.
That's right. That's right. Historically. And was stealing all their money.
And this is Elasticsearch. Just to set the stage a little bit, Elasticsearch wrote the post. Go ahead, continue on.
Right. So get some problems with AWS. You change the license around to try to prevent that, right? We see this, and then this evolved into what we see in the AI space, where it's like anyone's free to use this unless you're our competitors, right? Like then you can't use it. Cool, right? And that was 3 years ago, and then I guess they had like some great biz dev meetings, And now everything's cool, and they added an AGPL license. And I'm not up to date on the AGPL like I never was.
Yeah, but
I think the AGPL is the anti-public cloud license, if I remember. It's basically like,
it's like the poison pill, right? It's the poison pill of open source licensing, right? I'm going to make it open source, but you really can't use it. Is really what it is.
Which is like, you know, cool. That's fine too.
I mean, yeah, the AGPL is it's kind of like, I didn't understand why these database type companies wouldn't grab that before coming up with their, you know, weird licenses, unless they thought like, well, maybe somebody's willing to go along the AGPL track with us. What the Affero General Public License does is it says anything user facing has to be open source.
Right.
So it's the GPL where if you embed this, you know, things, you know, will get the GPL added to them. So it is the most viral of,
you have to make everything open source, which means like no one can really use it, right? I mean,
except for the holding company, which makes it a great open core, you know, relicensing business model license. It's been used by other folks previously, which it offsets a lot of the downsides of the server side public licenses, or you know, whatever these business, you know, abuse licenses are. So coming back to it is like, yeah, it's also probably the least business friendly license, right? So a lot of companies are like, I ain't touching that. You know, we don't allow that in the building. I mean, Apple famously won't allow any GPL in,
right? Because it's and I think we should be. This is for once. I agree. Like it is super dangerous, right? Like if you make a mistake and like, you know, you start to, if you will, combine the code or, you know, do the wrong thing, right? You can open yourself up to significant liability or potential like unwanted licensing changes. This is why most companies will like wave it off. The lawyers will be like, don't put this in the company.
Yeah, but I just have never really understood why it wasn't like a go-to for people wanting to, you know, close off their licensing, you know, by making it source available or whatever. I guess people would rather just say like, hey, so source code's available, you can send us patches. Businesses were more comfortable than saying like, oh, well, it's AGPL, but we've got the business version of it, you know, from the manufacturer, so we can send patches. I guess it was just that toxic that it scared people off. But with this change, I'm kind of like, it doesn't. If they've done this before, nothing changes. But if they've done this before,
very diplomatic, man. I'm just calling this entire blog post, I'm going to call it "The Founder Feels Sad" blog post. And I just want to read a few things from this post because it's just fantastic, right? First quote was, "Quote: Open source is in my DNA. It is in Elastic's DNA. Being able to call Elastic open source again is pure joy." I would say it's not in your DNA, given the fact that you made it closed source, that you changed the license, right? Like it just seems completely disingenuous. Next quote, "We never stop believing and behaving like an open source community after we changed the license." Again, no, that's exactly what you did. You did stop believing in open source and you stopped acting like an open source company, right? Then they go on to say, because you've already highlighted that they basically said they had, quote, "issues with AWS and the market confusion their offering was causing." It's like, no, nothing was being confused. You were sad that AWS was winning more business. That's what was going on. That wasn't confusion, right? But they go on to say, the good news is that while it was painful, it worked. 3 years later, Amazon is fully invested in their fork, and market confusion has been, quote, "mostly resolved." It's like, no, like none of this has been resolved. Like they created this problem, right? That Amazon just went out and created their own thing, which is totally fine, makes totally sense, right? And like nothing's been resolved, right? Other than,
well, it's resolved that people don't embed Elasticsearch in their stuff
people
anymore.
Just stop using it, right? They made their choice, and and then, you know, this final couple quotes here says, quote, "We want to make the life of our users as simple as possible," end quote. No, you didn't want to make your life simple for your users, right? You made it incredibly complicated for everyone, right?
And I mean, so, if they'd done this 3 years ago, you know, it would have definitely stunted open search as a fork. but they'd be similar to where Grafana Labs is, right? Grafana famously kind of relicensed the dashboard Grafana to AGPL. People still use it, right? Everywhere you go, you're still seeing Grafana, and it's, you know, you don't see a lot of you see hosted Grafana by Grafana Labs with Amazon, but you know, but you don't see a fork.
Let me just get out the final two, then I'll let you guys talk. It's like the last two quotes was the quote: "We chose AGPL versus another license because we hope our work with OSI will help to have more options in the open source licensing world." No, that's not why they chose AGPL. They just chose this because it was a convenient open source license that still prevents people from actually doing what they were trying to do before, right? Use the software to make money. And then the final one that opens with the euphoria brackets, which is in itself funny. It says, quote, "I'm so happy to be able to call Elasticsearch open source again." Well, I'm glad that Shay is happy, because, you know, I'm sure everybody that went through this entire 3-year ordeal is like really happy all of this happened. And like in the end, the final thought is like, I don't think Elasticsearch made any more money here. I don't think they caused a bunch of pain. Right? They alienated the whole community, and to come out and write this post, right? It's just like, I'm sorry you feel sad. Like, you made a decision, stand behind it, move on. Like, this doesn't change anything. I don't know, Cote, your thoughts.
Well, that sort of answers the question that I had in my mind, which is the idea of market confusion being resolved. And I guess what that means is not that AWS has become a great business partner, but that people understand that they have a forked version of Elastic or whatever, and Elastic has the Elastic version of Elastic.
Right. You have open source, open search, and Elasticsearch, right? So you just choose. Now at this point, people can just choose what they want to use and then just move on.
But people know those are separate things versus, like, you know, in my more commercial mindset, I read that and it's like, oh, now they're doing business together. But it's just like, no, just like now we know that these are two separate products, which I guess, I mean, I could see that, like, you know, not everyone, unfortunately, listens to our podcast or, you know, everything else and kind of is up to date on news. I could see that there would be confusion about that. But it does seem, yeah, it is.
They're creating confusion. The confusion that never existed was like they were sad that they weren't making enough money, so that's why they forked it, which is totally legit. Listen, let me be clear.
Right.
Well within their rights, they can totally do it. But now to come back and be like, well, there was confusion and we fixed this problem. It's like, no, you chose a different business strategy, and then, you know, I don't know, Matt. I'm going to give you the floor here. Like, I don't know why anyone would spend their time, you know, that doesn't work at Elasticsearch, contributing back to this going forward. So, I don't know, what is the conceivable case now that this is open source again, that you are in the community and you're like, this is great, I'm going to start contributing it again. Like, who will do that?
I don't see it. It's frustrating because if they had made this as their first choice, they would have delayed OpenSearch. They would have, you know, they would have been in a better position. Because when I think about a lot of their ancillary products, you know, their monitoring stacks, you know, a lot of that probably, you know, at least the agents and stuff didn't change licensing. So maybe people are still embedding those. So that I think they would have held on to more mind share longer, and had less of a public conflict with this, you know, breakup with their community. Now I don't see why anyone would want to get involved with this. I mean, maybe it makes their developers happier. Maybe it checks some tick box somewhere for them. But I think Grafana Labs had the right playbook with like, oh, you like open source? Well, we'll just make it so everything has to be open source unless you want the commercial product from us, right? That's been a long viable strategy. You know, you kind of hold your nose at it, call it open core, but it is it is a better strategy than this, source available business license, where people are just like, no, I'm done. They just, they jettison, everyone jettisons on that license as far as being involved, unless like you're embedded in it. But as we've seen with Oxide, nobody really wants a license, a database in the core of their product that licensing may change again in the future, because everyone's scared of Oracle, right? Or getting oracled. So nobody's now gonna be like, oh, this Elasticsearch looks good, I'm gonna embed it in my product, because I feel good about it. Like, no, they'll just keep using OpenSearch now.
Well, maybe we can end on this, because we won't go into it this week. You mentioned it, like the whole founder mode essay by Paul Graham, but we'll just say it says on the LinkedIn that Shay is a founder, and I'm like, here you go. Here's founder mode. Sad, I feel sad. 3 years later, I'm going to make this open source via the AGPL. Like, I don't know. I would love to know what's going on with the CEO, the board of directors. Like, what? Like, how is this adding value to anyone? So I just think the whole thing is just completely laughable.
Window dressing. Yeah.
Well, it's beyond it. It's just sort of like, it assumes like we're all idiots, right? It assumes that like, well, this 3 years just never happened, and it's just like, and something has now changed. So,
unless there are other products coming, and this is like their new direction, where again, just Grafana Labs, this is their playbook. It works fine.
Well,
I don't know. Playbook,
so when you read this blog post, though, like, it doesn't look like it went through corporate comms. I mean, to the point about how it's written. Maybe we can talk about that later. It just seems it's just absurd. The whole thing is absurd. And I think in the end, it probably won't have any effect on Elasticsearch. Like, you're either going to buy that product because it has good features and does what you want, or you probably made the decision to move on. But like, certainly, the whole post is just ridiculous.
Well, we started a segment last week, Brandon. What is a practical, boring way for everyday life that you've used AI? And I just want to insert a brief one here. I feel like maybe having it later in the show is good than at the beginning. And I haven't experimented with this enough, but I like the idea. I was catching up with our friend John Willis, big into AI. And he said what he does nowadays is whenever he starts a chat session, he asks the AI to introduce itself, tell it who they are, what they do, kind of have a little chat with it. And I'm intrigued by this. Yeah, I'm intrigued by this idea that in the same way that if you were having small talk with a person, right? Like, you kind of start having the small talk, you what's the idiom people use? You thaw the ice, like you kind of like, warm someone up, and then you kind of move into like the actual serious talk. Yeah. And like I said, I haven't done this quite yet, but this is something I want to start experimenting with.
So just to be clear, though,
a little bit of chit chat.
He's asking the AI to introduce itself, not.
Yes, that's right.
Right. Okay, so he's saying like, "Hello, ChatGPT, please introduce yourself."
Yeah, he's like, "Who are you?" Like, tell
because the AI already knows who John Willis is.
Oh, well,
probably,
of course. So how would you say? Well, I do like, because there's something written. I think, Cote, it's probably the thing you don't like, but like, there's something like, I've read something around the reason, like small talk, like talking about the weather, or like where you're from, or like, like these kind of like canned questions that often come up in early conversations, or like they play some role in like human, at like, it's some way that like I guess what you're kind of alluding to, you warm up a conversation, and it's like helpful to the human brain to like kind of like do that before like you get into something like some new topic. So I don't know. Maybe we're inflicting that on the AI. I don't know.
Well, you ask the AI, what's the weather like? And it's like, well, my current core temperature is 48 Celsius. And, and my back plane is at, 57, but my hot aisle's hot and my cold aisle's cold. That's how I like it.
Yeah. Well, maybe
last week, this is the whole friend AI where you just start talking about it. Something like, maybe you would start with something more like, you just talk to the AI, be like, hey, how was your day? Right. And like the thing doesn't have, it could just make something up, but you're just really, all you want it to do is ask you, well, Cote, how was your day? And then you start talking, and then you probably are in like a mental zone of like, yeah, I know it's a computer, but I can just like get everything off my chest. I can just say whatever I want. No, it's like journaling through a conversation.
Well, you mentioned the first step. The first step of the neural network is Cote likes weather. Oh, you've unlocked some new stuff.
No, exactly. And like, so I re-signed up despite what I said last time with Gemini. to kind of try it out.
Right.
Because just like the integration with like Google Apps or whatever they call it and everything else is very interesting. And they also have this giant context window. So maybe like if you had a long enough context window, you could actually go in the next day and say like, how's it been going? And it would kind of like understand this conversation. And then the other thing, like, I don't know if this is true. I'm no anthropologist or psychologist, but to a certain extent, a lot of small talk is calibrating how to talk with someone. Like you're doing like there must be some word for this in like API stuff, but you're sort of like bouncing stuff off of each other to discover what the APIs are and the semantics and everything. And so maybe that seems like it would fit with AI stuff really well, is you're kind of like training it for your interactions, the way you talk with stuff, and it can also probe and experiment with like how it wants to interact with you. So maybe the small talk is just a way of saying like, here's how I want you to be, and here's how I am. And I don't know. It's something we'll have to.
We should give this some name. I guess it's the John Willis introduction prompt or something. Maybe we'll. I don't know. Everyone should try it. Maybe everyone listening, try having the AIs introduce yourself. Tell us, either send us an email or find us in Slack and tell us like what happened. And if it's really bad or it causes some legal thing, we don't want to hear about that. I don't want to hear about that.
And I think the thing that you two have added is you should also ask like, how's the weather in your part of the world? Just sort of like very like, what did you do yesterday? How's things going? How's the family?
I just wanted to tell me things about the availability zone it's in.
Well, speaking of availability zones, we always have a lot of availability for people who are interested in stickers. So Brandon, can you give us the rundown of new listeners who have stickers?
I certainly can. We sent stickers to Justin in Ohio, Donnie in Maine, and Steve in Texas, which is actually not very far from me. So if you would like a sticker, all you have to do is send your postal address to stickers@softwaredefinedtalk.com. I will be happy to send you a sticker anywhere in the world. Also, a couple follow-ups from last week. We were talking about, I recommended some of these like sleeping earbuds. So I did get some different ideas. So one, Bruce's wife recommends this sold by Amazon. I'm sure you can get them other places. It's essentially like what would you call it? Like a headband that has like Bluetooth speakers in it. So you put it on there, you put it on your head. It's very inexpensive. I think it's like $10. I tried one. I didn't personally like it, but I would say, as I told him in the Slack, this is obviously the much more economical way of doing this because I paid like, $250. So this would be a good place to start. Also, this is also maybe more just in the life hack kind of thing, and probably people do this, is that JD recommends just like you just put in one earbud and then you sleep on the side and you just kind of leave that in. But his hack is that you have to have a backup set of earbuds, because as you all know, if you sleep with one earbud, it eventually will get lost, and you want to wake up in the morning and be stuck, like, going through your sheets trying to find your earbuds. So I thought those were both pretty good recommendations. And then finally, really off topic of this, but I still think it's interesting, and maybe Matt can tell us a little bit about, is like the whole idea of these bone conduction headphones, let's call it, where they don't have anything in the ear canal. They just, if you will, drivers sit, I guess, just outside your ear and like, play the music through your bones. I guess the frequencies go through that. People said they just like them. So I don't know, Matt, you're like the athlete runner here. What's your, I know, do you use them? Like what
I do. So there was, the thread turned into a whole lot of people piling on saying that they were using them. So the brand that most people seem to use is Shocks, and the open run ones I use, they sit kind of on like just outside your ears, and keep the ears open so you can hear cars or traffic or sounds of nature, what have you, but it still goes through, and the sound quality is actually very good. And so one of the things I've noticed as runners, they're like, this brand in particular is very popular with trail runners, because you want to keep your head on a swivel in case you hear something or what have you. They're not great in loud, noisy urban environments, or airplane or places that have a lot of noise, because your ears are still open. They're not blocking anything, but they were great. And so highly recommend them. somebody commented that the Aftershocks brand, which Shocks purchased, I guess, that had some reliability issues, but I've had nothing but good luck with mine, and literally run hundreds of kilometers with them on. So highly recommended.
Sounds very cyberpunk. Bone conducting earphones.
Yeah, it sounds freaky at first, but when you put them on, they're like, oh, this is odd, but it works. There's it doesn't feel weird. It just kind of works, and you're like, it's not in my ears. How does this work? I don't care after a while.
Yeah. Well, I have a little bit of bureaucracy. So last episode, I said I was almost at 800 subscribers, and now I'm at 818. So good job, listeners. Enough people signed up. I think it worked out well. I haven't yet reached out to the 800th subscriber to see if we can go over their life story. Maybe we'll have a small mini series. do a quick interview.
A new segment, Cote subscribers.
Yeah, maybe we'll get around to it. But if you want to be subscriber 819, you can go to newsletter.cote.io and subscribe to it. One person, they said, I tried it out, and it felt like I was just walking into the middle of a conversation amongst a bunch of people at a bar, and it was very confusing. And I don't mean this in a dismissive way, but I was like, mission accomplished. That's what's going on there.
Welcome to Cote's bar.
I was gonna say, and that's not this podcast. That's actually the newsletter. Go on.
Indeed. Well, also there's several conferences coming up. There's the Civo Navigate Europe in Berlin, and I was catching up with one of my old coworkers, Hannah Foxwell, who's also putting on a great AI event in October in London. I forget the name of it, but you should look that up. Maybe I'll find it for the show links. But she's going to be there as well as us mentioning it. But it looks like, I checked it out. It looks like they have a lot going on there. There's also SRE Day London 2024, September 19th and 20th, which I'll be at. And then there's Cloud Foundry Day in Karlsruhe, Germany. We'll just say in Germany, which is going to be October 9th. I'll be there as well. And then, of course, VMware Explore in Barcelona, November 4th to 7th, where I'll also be. And then SRE Day Amsterdam, where I live. So that'll be nice. I'll just ride my bike and go speak there. There's some discounts to some of those. If you want to check them out, you can get like 20% off of most of them, I think. If you go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/483, which means in 3 episodes, we're going to have the 486. Hopefully. I don't think they had turbo mode with that, did they? I think we made the show with episode 386. But I think, did the 486 have turbo mode? Or were they like...
I'll have to look it up. I don't know. I think we'll give
Kelsinger credit for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. In retrospect, the concept of turbo mode, well, I guess it existed because you had older software that would be unusable if it was too performant. So yeah, okay, that does make sense why you would have that. You'd have to like downshift your processor, so like you could use WordStar 3 or something like that. Who knows? Well, so Brandon, when you're not using WordStar 3 on your Dr. DOS emulator, what's something you would recommend to people this episode?
Well, I've recommended it before, but they just started a new season 4. It's Slow Horses on Apple TV. So like Apple TV is really become like what they call it, like, dad, Gen X dad TV. I love it. And they just another good season. I watched the first episode last night. Looks like it's going to be an interesting season. So if you're looking for something to watch, check out Slow Horses.
Sign me up.
Yeah. How about yourself, Matt Ray? What do you have to recommend?
Well, my recommendation this week is a follow-up from my last recommendation. Last time I recommended universal control from Apple, the sharing a keyboard and mouse between multiple Macs. I'm unrecommending that. It just kind of stopped working.
Wait, is that allowed on our show? Can you have an unrecommend?
I'm taking it back. I'm going to go.
Just to be fair, we're not going back to edit the audio. That audio will come on.
So yeah, universal control, when it works great, but it periodically would just kind of pause and time out. And I learned like, if I just, kill the daemon, it returns faster. But that got annoying where, every 8 or 9 minutes, I would have to like hit a button to kill the daemon. So I started to use Barrier, which was the open source fork of the original Synergy. But like Barrier hadn't been updated for more than 2 years. And I'm sure we'll talk about this in the future, but my work laptop is very locked down, and I could not use unsigned software. And when I built it from source, it just didn't work. And so I was frustrated. So I went to go just pay for a Synergy trial. And I noticed that the original Synergy source code, version 1.0, which is what Barrier forked off of, is still under active development, and has commits yesterday, and people making builds. And so turns out the original Synergy works just fine. So the UI doesn't work great, but if you're not afraid to put a config file on your system and tweak it by hand, it's perfect. It's so seamless. It's smooth. It works over Ethernet. I don't have drag and drop file share anymore, but I wasn't using that. So everything else is just working perfect. So open source Synergy, that's my pick.
That is a Matt Ray pick. It's like the Apple thing's
I know, right?
All you got to do is download this thing, update this config file, and it all works perfectly. I love it. Fantastic pick.
Yeah, saves you $29.
It's fantastic.
Also very on brand for Matt. I like that. I have two recommendations. One of them is like, they're both happened here in Antwerp. So at the corner of this place I'm staying, there's this shop called Little Shop of Hoarders, which is, first of all, a great pun. And it's like a combination, like vinyl record and CD store and like rock t-shirts, and also like a few miscellaneous little knickknacks. Now, I'm not like a record store person, but it was fun. Like I went in there and I actually found one of my daughter's birthdays is coming up. She doesn't listen to the podcast, so I can say this, but I found she oh, that's a good point. She's learning guitar, so I got her a vintage AC/DC shirt, which I think will go well. That seems like what you do with kids. So that was fun. Little Shop of Hoarders. And also I found there was a Vietnamese restaurant here, which, like, oddly enough, you don't get that much in Europe. At least I don't. So I went to eat lunch there, and I was wearing a white shirt. And of course I ordered the pho or the pho or whatever you want to say. And I got some red sauce on it. So I stopped by a CNA shop, which is, what is CNA? It's kind of like a low rent Gap, I guess, like in this area. And I'm wearing it right now for people who can see it, but I got myself a denim pearl snap shirt, and I highly recommend it because I feel like I'm almost in a few years, I'll be 50. And I feel like that is the time in your life where you can finally just wear denim shirts, just all denim. And, you could, that's the lifestyle. You can wear your boat shoes. You can start wearing denim shirts with different colored denim pants. And so far, I like it. I'm enjoying the lifestyle that might be there. Now, you've been enjoying the Software Defined Talk lifestyle. If you've been listening this far and you don't subscribe to the podcast, you should figure out how to subscribe to it by going to softwaredefinedtalk.com and clicking on subscribe. We also post videos of us doing this. If you really want to see how the sausage is made, I should say before the sausage, you don't actually see how it gets made. You see all the stuff that goes into the sausage, which I'm going to have to think about as a companion idiom for seeing how the sausage is made. You can look in our YouTube channel and see the videos that we have, all sorts of things like that. Also, we've got a lively Slack channel that we alluded to a little bit with this mention of the thread and other things that you can figure out how to join if you go to softwaredefinedtalk.com and click on Slack. And with that, remember, the next time that you have, you're at a bar and you've scammed someone to get the passcode for their phone and then you steal it, don't transfer money from them. Just subscribe them to Software Defined Talk and give their phone back to them as if nothing had happened. And, it'll grow our listeners a little bit. So with that, we'll see everyone next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Well done, Cote. And well done to everybody who was watching along. I just forgot to open the chat interface. So we had a bunch of good people on here. We had Darth Vikes, like the name. Brett was on, Systems Guy. I think Graham was on there as well. So I appreciate all of you watching as always. So I don't know, Cote, do you want to give us your writer's take on, I don't even know what to call them, the parent bracketed
brackentheticals.
The brackentheticals. What this is just a legitimate question seeking knowledge. Was that supposed to imply like music? Like, what is that supposed to imply?
Well, I've opened it back up. I'm taking a look at it, narrating my thoughts. First of all, there's a lot of intentionality to it because they're also italicized. And I don't mean any of this to sound critical in a bad way, but critical in a let's figure out what's going on here and have fun with it way. You've also got a mixture of properly casing words and not doing the Sam Altman lowercase. So you have like that in one paragraph, which both words are capitalized. But then you have another paragraph, euphoria, where euphoria is not capitalized. Now you've got another variation, which is fascinating. Sometimes there's a period and sometimes there's not. Humble, all caps, period. Maybe there's a pattern that if it's in all caps, there's a period. However, first paragraph, you have DNA, you have D period, N period, A, no period. So I think, and
so
I was saying,
noun, like, so DNA, just a noun, no period. Love,
I think,
loyalty, kind of emotions. Is that what's going on here?
I feel like, let's see if I like the sound of this. I feel like what's going on here, and again, I'm applying what I learned in studying English in university or college, as we would say, that once a piece of text is released into the wild, it no longer has any loyalty to the original intentions of the author. So you can just go buck wild with it, however you want. That's what I learned from Professor Newton. Great guy. Hopefully he's still alive doing his thing. However, it was Victorian literature, which I was just like, Jesus Christ, I'm going to stop majoring in this. But I feel like maybe what's going on here is the equivalent of like stage directions, right? So, like before some actor, like in a script, like gives a great thing that's sort of like, Romeo walks dramatically across the stage, right? Mm-hmm. And so what you see here is like, this is a stage direction for like the vibe of the paragraph, right? And the vibe can be kind of like a summary of it, but it's more like, what is the feeling that I want you to have? And so the first paragraph, the DNA with only 2 periods, that is more of a summary, but it's sort of like, I want you to understand the identity of this, right? And then, okay. and then you get the like euphoria. That one's very clear, right? Even though it's lowercase, which I don't know how to cope with that, right? But like the euphoria is like, now it's almost like, so what it says is, I am so happy to be able to call Elasticsearch open source again. Let's imagine that's in a script. And I think in a script, when you do this, you use the parentheses and you put it in italics. And it would say like, with euphoria in tone, right? To kind of give direction to the actor, they would say this. So that's my take on what's going on here with the brackentheticals, is it's kind of like stage direction for both the writing, but also the reading of what's going on.
You should read it with like a certain kind of intent. All right. And then the final, before we get out of here, you can, it's like, I just want to know, I mean, this is again, another dumb question here. So is Not Like Us, is that then a reference to the diss track from Kendrick Lamar? Or am I like, or what is an alternative reading of Not Like Us?
Well, I'm not up to date on my Kendrick Lamar references, but if that's a phrase, probably.
All right. Well, we'll leave it on this, because Not Like Us was the diss track that Kendrick Lamar released. That's fairly popular, but where he kind of destroys Drake, and it's like, but in this whole thing, I think this is part I think is, I guess, ironic and both funny. It's like, no, like, you're Drake. Like if I were to like draw the analogy, it would be like Elasticsearch is Drake in this situation, right? They were the ones that are not quote unquote legitimate in the beliefs of the broader community, is what I would say. So I don't know. I mean, we've probably given this too much time, and maybe someone can write in and tell us, like, what did you call them? Bracken? What was it? What
brackentheticals? Because you have parentheticals.
Is that a real word? Is brackentheticals a word?
I don't think. I think.
Okay, well, we're gonna go with it. I don't know. I've never seen this used in writing, so I don't. That's why I believe this is breaking new ground in corporate comms. But maybe I'm just misled. So
I just want to add one more thing that I just noticed. There is one fragment of a sentence that's in bold, which I think maybe that's like the main idea getting across, right? And it's it says adding another option, comma, and not removing anything, which I think is maybe that might be the most important. It's a good mixture of like business and what's happening, right? It's saying like we're not actually changing anything. We're giving more function, more capability, right? So we still have all the existing stuff, so we don't have to rewrite that, so to speak. We're just adding something new that gives you another option for what's going on, and it's bolded, which I think is interesting. I think overall, I mean, you kind of, well, not kind of, you said this in your very Brandon way. This is a remarkable piece of corporate communication. I think it's good stuff. I love it.
All right. Well, for everyone who's still watching, we appreciate it. And don't worry, maybe, probably Cote and Matt would probably opt out of it. We could probably do another hour on this. Just what was it? Exegesis. We could probably do a full episode on this one piece of writing, tearing it apart. But we will not do that today. We will spare you any more analysis of that. And we appreciate you watching. We will be streaming again very soon, probably next week around this time. And until then, we'll talk to you later.